Jeff, I'd like to welcome you to the RevAmp podcast. We're really happy to have you aboard today, and really eager to learn a lot more from your experiences. For those who don't already know you, could you perhaps just by starting by saying who you are, your current role and position, and maybe where you're working, and a little bit about that company?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gideon. Appreciate you having me on today. So my name is Jeff Wadholm, and I am the Vice President of Global Revenue Operations at a company called MindBody. So we are a business management software. We focus in the wellness space. So if you haven't heard of MindBody as a software company, you may have heard us as a consumer. We have an app that you can go on and find local wellness in your area, whether it's a salon, a spa, a fitness class, any of the verticals in the wellness industry. So I lead the revenue operations organization there.
Fantastic. And I know for some people, the role of revenue operations is something that's still being defined and recognized in the wider space. How did you find yourself getting into that role? What was your journey or your pathway?
Yeah, great question. So, so I started my career in corporate FP&A. So I was a FP&A analyst and moved into a leadership role where I was leading a revenue management function. And a good dear friend of mine, his name is Ramsey Hashem. Ramsey was a CRO at the time, and I was his support partner. So we were having a usual monthly variance expense review, and I'll never forget it because it was a polarizing moment for me. He said, "Hey man," he said, "you got too much personality to be doing this job working in finance. Why don't you come over and work for me?" And I was both, it was a compliment and I was also offended. And I said, I'll never forget my response. I said, "Yeah, hey, I can't sell. What are you talking about?" And he said, "No, you idiot." He said, "Come over to my side and do what you do over there, but do it over here." And this was probably 13 years ago, I think. And at the time, sales operations was still early in its adoption across large corporates. So it was still new in a concept. We had some sales operations background, but wasn't something that was on my radar. So I just remember I went home that day and had a little heart-to-heart with my family, and we took a leap of faith, and here I am, 13 years later, and hopefully, part of that adoption phase. I'd love to think of myself as someone that's been involved there.
So have you seen a lot of significant changes within the space, within the sales operations role? I guess, yeah. Of course, the technology would have changed, but have the processes changed significantly?
Yeah, I think from core sales operations, the function has evolved, but is still in its nucleus is similar. The technology is really where things have accelerated, and not just with AI or ML, but just in the access to data and our ability to manipulate, move, change, find information. It has just accelerated significantly, especially in just the last 3-4 years. But I think from a just purely sales operations perspective, a lot of the core functionality does remain the same. And I think I would say that we're continuing to add on rather than subtract from that core of where it all started.
Absolutely. So today you've got an interesting subject for us to dive into. Just going to refer to my headline notes here: aligning your revenue operations mission to enterprise value creation. So absolutely a mouth-watering title. Break it down. Start us off. What does that mean? What does that mean?
So I think if I back up just a little bit, what I would say is I think a lot of us in sales and revenue operations, we do ourselves a disservice, and we at times marginalize our impact by just the words we choose. We have a hard time stepping out of our world, and we use words like productivity and efficiency. And while that's really sexy for other sales ops and RevOps professionals, I think we lose our audience at the C-suite at times. And so as I think about my foundational approach to revenue operations, it's really around how do we create more value in our business. And we can dive into what that means, but it's really less around efficiency and effectiveness, and more about how do we create a more valuable company that we can show out to the world. And I think I've seen it kind of time and time again. And the bigger the audience, it almost seems like we just continue to perpetuate the efficiency, effectiveness, and analytics, right? And at the end of the day, I believe the core of all that is to grow the company, at scale, effectively, efficiency, and create enterprise value.
So I'm going to take a leap of faith here and say that when you come with the mindset of how to create more value for the company, it's probably been influenced to some degree by the fact that you've been involved in several M&A type of situations yourself. You've lived that, you've walked a mile in those shoes. And of course, you will have known from, in a really profound way about what that value can be, how that value can be articulated on the receiving end of it. And now you're perhaps in the driving seat of creating that value. How has that experience affected your view and your
Yeah.
practice?
Yeah, I mean, it started early in my career. I think, as a RevOps professional, having an FP&A background, I believe I learned the language of business, which is finance. And it gave me a different, interesting, unique perspective into the business that if I would have came in from sales or enablement, I would have had a much more commercial view. And so my roots are heavy in that FP&A and ultimately EBITDA discussion and sustainable growth model. And so, as my career has progressed, I've had these wonderful opportunities with high growth companies who are both acquisitive, and I've had a lot of experience, in the PE world, being acquired by different PE firms and implementing their playbook. I think those are the things that, as you're a RevOps professional looking to take that next leap or to get that promotion, to tying your value to that enterprise creation is how you can perk the ears of that senior leader in the business. And M&A is one of those really polarizing things that is really sexy and interesting to talk about, and then really challenging for the operators in the background to go deliver on. And I think M&A is one of those topics that is an area where RevOps can really make an impact on accelerating value creation. So the sooner you're, getting to that first customer, implementing them into your customer journey, aligning tech stacks and personnel, really a value add that if you marginalize yourself into that, productivity and efficiency, you miss an opportunity to tie yourself to the goals of the business and to, ultimately your CEO.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else in terms of your GTM motion where you would take that M&A mindset or scope and bring it into your GTM motion? Is there anything else to be included, or do you kind of cover the main pillars there when you talked about quick wins and adoption?
Kind of the natural inclination I have around revenue operations is three pillars, and one of them is fueling sustainable revenue growth. And I can dive into that. I think that's an important topic to talk about, but I also think about the whole customer journey, which is where I do believe revenue operations departs from sales ops, is thinking about customer retention, right? And customer journey, customer satisfaction. And by having that more enterprise view, I think it does tie into, if that mindset exists in your whole team, we're all aligned in going towards that enterprise value. But the fueling sustainable revenue growth is an interesting topic, because I think it may be a different way to talk about.
I want to hear about it.
Efficiency. But when I step back, I believe that most of us in this RevOps profession, we do get tasked in or tagged in on those larger enterprise projects, which is the integration of acquisitions, which could potentially be part of the team that's helping with diligence on acquiring companies, or packaging your company to be sold, whether it's to an IPO or to a PE or even maybe a strategic acquisition. And then it trickles, and that trickles into your global expansion, and how do you support globalizing your product and your sales organization and sales readiness, and then as you think continue through your own internal team, the product side of things, how do we operationalize and bring to market new product offerings, new pricing models? Revenue operations is a key contributor to that process.
Right.
And again, if you just stick to the efficiency, I think a lot of CEOs and maybe even CROs just hear, oh yeah, fewer button clicks. They're gonna make it, he or she's gonna make it easier for the sales reps to get their job done. But as you really think deeper into those, peel that onion back, it is around optimization and how does your tech stack contribute to accelerating revenue growth? And how do you think about that continuous improvement process? Those are those next layers of dialogue and discussion that I think world-class RevOps teams do naturally, and we see it and we see the impact. But I think that's the next evolution. That is, we're talking about here, sitting on a podcast where hopefully a lot of RevOps folks are going to have the chance. Maybe that light bulb goes off of, oh, you know, I thought I was saying the right thing, and maybe I lost my audience, right? And you know, we weren't drinking our own champagne. If we're talking about sales enablement, sales methodology, and we're going to go sell our services internally to our C-suite, let's make sure that we're using the right language. And how do we think about that? How do we quantify those impacts?
I find it fascinating because when you think about that kind of readiness phase, at some point it feels like there's a transition play where, you know, initially you're trying to grow exponentially or achieve hyper growth or grow, you know, at a higher cost of acquisition. And then if you're probably getting ready to be acquired or any of the other options that you mentioned there, you probably want to cut back on some of the expensive overheads that allowed you to kind of saturate or penetrate market so quickly. How long, when do you know, when do the traffic lights kind of kick in? When do you know to change gear? What are the signals? How do you do that without alarming the rest of the company, who are probably quite attuned to your actions?
It's a great question. I think it's probably more art than science. And I would say having a lot of experience in those kind of start, stop, continues around M&A and whether it be a divestiture or an acquisition, is really built starting with trust with your C-suite, with your CRO, with your CCO, with your CSO, is knowing that you're the trusted advisor and you have a seat at that table. And then you've got to have your own trusted advisors. You've got to have a right hand or a left hand that can help you to be able to navigate through some of those tricky things. You know, my experience as a senior leader in RevOps has been a lot of that time. That's where it's time for you to roll up your sleeves and do that. You know, do that analysis after hours or you know before work starts or what have you. But I think if you tie in the two discussions around setting your sights on value creation, if you're speaking the language of the CEO, the CFO, the CTO, that should give you a better relationship, a better trust to be able to go, okay, they understand what we're thinking here. And it's not just around, hey, those guys optimize the CRM workflows or the CPQ workflows or the back office work, right? So it's becoming that accelerated organization within the corporation that you know, hopefully, if you've done your job right, they couldn't imagine doing any of these things without you, whether it's acquiring a company, divesting a company, preparing for an IPO. And then you've got to have a trusted advisor, a great relationship with your team, and know what they are, right? And there is a balance. You mentioned it. It's the balance is, how do you not signal out to the business, hey, there's activity happening, but also deliver that value back to the business that they need, right, around insights or, you know, or the diligence piece.
Very good. So moving one step further forward from that, you touched on it very briefly, but we didn't dig in yet to optimizing your revenue tech stack. What does a revenue tech stack look like for someone who's in the process of building one?
Yeah, I think you know, your revenue tech stack or go-to-market tech stack, it probably varies based on how you're structured. And so, you know, the different variations of revenue operations may be a combination of traditional sales operations and marketing operations. For me, I've got experience on the CS side as well in customer operations.
Right.
And we're actually doing some unique things where we have our pre-sales and solutions engineers reporting into RevOps. And so what that does is it really centralizes kind of all of those support functions. And as I think about tech stack, it's really around, for me, it's around two things. It's around simple and simple good. And it's around how do we provide the right amount of data and information that's consumable and actionable for the business. Those are the two key components. If it makes my life simpler, my global sales organization simpler, my customer operations or customer services teams lives simpler, those are the right things. And then the other side of that is around how do we get the right information to drive actionable business decisions.
Do you have to filter information? Do you have to be the first eyes on stuff and then translate it into dumbed down iterations for it to go out to the different
Yeah, I think
departmental leads, or do you give it in the raw kind of this is as it is?
I think I think it's a great opportunity. So if there's a young RevOps analyst out there who's thinking about that, I think audience and altitudes are really important. And knowing and hearing your audience and finding that right altitude of where they like to operate is a key success driver. If you're looking to accelerate your career, move into that next step, I would encourage anybody to go out there and really think about those two things: is how do I find what my audience cares about, and then how do I put that data in the right altitude? So I think I probably haven't spent a lot of time with any groups where I would say they look for information that's dumbed down. My experience is, especially over the last probably 5 years, is our senior leaders have really accelerated their ability to digest and have an appetite for detail and data in a way that maybe if you profiled, the past, wouldn't have been there.
Right.
The executive dashboard has gone by the wayside in a way, as our CEOs and presidents, COOs really are living in the information almost at the same level as some of us. Sure, there's a very deep level of analysis, I think, that happens in a lot of our operations groups. But I think it's been an interesting evolution to see just how roll up your sleeves and in the weeds most of our senior leaders have become. And that's around, again, finding that right altitude, right? Where do you want to be and where do they want to play?
I think it's only better for all of us. So moving forward from that to kind of supporting the global expansion for go-to-market, how does that play a part in your role?
Yeah, in revenue operations, if you think of traditional functions around our systems, things like CPQ, which would be, we might be thinking about product offerings or currencies, but sales readiness as well, right? How do we think about languages, and how do we be the liaison between end users, customers, and consumers, maybe back to product, and how do we become that voice of sales, right? How do we say that? And how do we translate maybe technical product stuff that comes over to us into sales readiness, into customer language? And I think as you look to globalize, that becomes increasingly important because I think it's obvious that one country or one region of the world isn't like the next. And I believe one of the core functions for RevOps is to support that global expansion. And I don't just mean have the ability to make that first sale, but to follow it from lead to cash, to make sure that we're thinking about the customer journey, but putting it in their terms and not just, hey, here's how we go to market. We go to market like this. That may not resonate with the customers or consumers, the way they buy, where legal gets involved. Does legal exist? There's all those different considerations as you look at global expansion that I think RevOps can have the ability to impact positively.
Do you have anybody because you have a pretty dynamic RevOps team by most standards, do you have anybody in-house that helps you to acclimatize to the cultural norms and practices of those new regions? Somebody who speaks from all the subtleties that you might be like completely offending the norms of that culture as you put your best foot forward?
Yeah, I would say a dedicated function, no, but our sales enablement team is really the hub to those many spokes. And that may be with our product marketing team, with our competitive intel team, certainly with our sales organizations, with marketing. They're the hub in that organization, as far as that expansion. As far as dedicating a role, not yet. But I think there's an interesting, depending on where you are in your global expansion process, there is such nuance. I think the nuance can be a make or break, and whether you can succeed in new markets. So I would call sales enablement for us and revenue enablement on the CS side as well, as that core function that plays the hub to the spokes.
Very good. So with all the data that you receive from all of these different inputs, what data are you able to feed back to product team, and how are you able to create that handshake between your role and what they do?
Yeah,
How
I
does
think
that?
there's a lot of interesting ways, Gideon, that I think I've seen in the span of my career on how we can inform that. And first of all, it starts with having a relationship and knowing that one another exists in the organization. So depending on how big your company is, if you're in a large corporation, multiple thousands of employees, that may not be the case. Is that your average product development folks may not know that RevOps exists, and vice versa. So I think starting there is key to build a bridge. But then as you think about things like voice of customer, competitive data, as you think about win-loss information, reason codes for wins and losses, being a conduit back from sales, via kind of center of excellence, post-mortem deal analysis where we can be voice of customer, voice of field. I think is a great way for RevOps to, again, play a hub in this multi-spoke around product. And then certainly on the other side, as product looks to bring new products to market, there's an opportunity there not just to provide information, but to be the conduit out to the business. And that's around pricing, and how do we think about discounting and market awareness? How do we drive the right sales incentives and commission plans to incent that? How do you think about arming the sales team, right readiness, right talk track, right altitude, again, as you look around globalization or different markets, verticals, even your sales motions, even between your traditional hunting or land motion and your expand motion and farming, the talk track changes, right? As you think about how do we, what is the time to value and speed to value for customers? Those things change, whether they're already one of your core customers and you're adding on, or if you're starting from day one. So I think that's a way that we can be an extension of the product organization. Partnering with product marketing, partnering with product development, I think is an opportunity for every RevOps team to, again, is stepping way back to the beginning. As you look at enterprise value creation, that's a way to step out of that. Hey, we're the Salesforce guys, we're the Excel guys, right? Our team does, we do the forecast. Yeah, we do the forecast, and yes, we do the Excel, and yes, we do the Salesforce, but it's that extension of value that we create internally. That's a pivot, right? And that's, I think, where you can change the game for your organization.
And then tell me, what unique insights do you create which inform business decisions beyond what I would expect to hear out of the box? Is there anything special that you do differently or better when it comes to surfacing those insights?
Yeah, I think the key thing is there's the what I call up and out and down and in, and down and in for me is how do we think about segmenting and targeting our customers, and we have a very unique segmentation that we use to target the right customers, and I don't mean just the surface level of right customers might be conversion ratios off of leads, but we look at the full customer lifetime value, CLTV, on our segmentation of likelihood to churn and retention, likelihood to expand and buy more, and so really looking at the holistic life cycle of the customer with the business as part of your segmentation. So I think there's a value add there that is more so than hey, if they're purple, call them. It's really around how do you understand the DNA of what happens after we get them in, right? How do we retain customers, make sure that they're expandable? And then the up and out insights, as you look at your executive teams, your C-suite, your product leaders, marketing leaders, certainly. Standard fare is, we call reporting the weather, 75 and sunny today. If you're somewhere else, maybe 28 and sunny, depending on where you are in the world.
Yeah, you forgot where my hometown was, right?
Yeah. So
Rainy.
It's 24 and raining, yes. 24 and raining in London, always. But yeah, so I think that's standard fare, but I believe when you can add more value to the discussion is when you do have that that level of insight that says, hey, I'm not just looking at the data on the spreadsheet. It's that I've been talking to the sales organization. I've actually rode along with some of the SDRs on their calls. I have that connection with product. And as such, we're able to provide deeper insights into what's going on in the market, following and staying on top of what our competitors are doing with acquisitions, or maybe even adjacent spaces. Hey, did you hear that? Lululemon just bought Mirror, right? Some of those things that's really interesting. How does that impact? Rather than, again, just kind of taking that back seat to, hey, we're going to, give you steps and tricks to fewer clicks in Salesforce. It really marginalizes. And I have this interesting quote, and I'm pretty sure I have the quotee right. I think it was my friend Hillary who said, sales ops and RevOps is sometimes like the plumbing, right? Plumbing in a home or a business is when you walk into the home, you're never looking for whether the plumbing works or not. But as soon as it doesn't work, you have a problem. And then everyone knows you have a problem. And I think there's the shift in all of us is around how do we become the foundation and the walls and the roof, right? This is the structure of what the business does, especially around go-to-market, but around the entire customer journey is a great opportunity for all of us.
Very good. So I guess, and from what I've taken from speaking to you now and before, is that there must be a continual process of improvement within your organization. What does that look like? I guess there's something like a RevOps flywheel where there's a cyclical nature to things. What does that look like in your case or within your experience?
I love that. I love the RevOps flywheel. Like that's a great thing. Here's what I'll say. I'll go out on the edge of the cliff and say I believe so deeply in continuous improvement and optimization that I've actually created a small subset of a dedicated organization within my RevOps team that's focused solely on continuous improvement. And I believe that I have a phrase it's a little crude, so bear with me. It's kill Sally, and Sally stands for same as last year. Because we believe deeply that what got us here won't get us there. And even what happened 90 days ago, especially in today's crazy environment, what worked in February of 2020 probably isn't working on July 1st of 2020. And so by constantly checking ourselves, creating an environment in your RevOps organization that is ripe for ideation, improvement, creating an area where you can fail, I think is a great space for us who are sometimes by nature overly analytical or really attached to the success of a project. And I think for all of us to step back and just say, hey, let's create an environment where we have a way of working, a way of thinking, a way of talking that can drive team acceleration. How do you get the whole team? I have a friend, his name is Joe Slater. He's the CEO of a company called Better Practice, and Joe teaches teams how to accelerate. He literally is coming into your organization saying, this is a way of working for any team and any organization to accelerate. And it's been one of those pivotal moments in my career where I really had a light bulb, where I thought deeply about individual personal acceleration of people. Is if everyone starts sprinting or has the right gas tank to be able to run long distance. But it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks one day is, man, what if they sprint in the other directions? What if one goes left and right, one goes north and south? So really around how do you take continuous improvement, make it part of your daily discussion, every huddle you have, creating an improvement council, and really just having a really healthy disrespect for the status quo. This is what we do here. And I think we don't do enough of that. It's really easy to get stuck because you're focused on the next shiny thing.
It's implicit from what you said that you must be hiring a certain caliber and type of person then from that, because that might not be the traditional view of what a RevOps person looks like. That person committed to continual improvement, out of the box thinking, failing well, et cetera, et cetera. You might think that they'd be the data junkie or whatever else. But no, you've implicitly kind of hinted that you must be hiring a certain type of person. So what is that person?
Yeah, so the person is primarily someone who focuses on getting things done, right? getting things done can look like a variety of different things. But I think if you look at career opportunities within your RevOps org, so your RevOps org may be 10 or it might be 100, but as you look at the different rungs of the ladder and where people with maybe unique, maybe they aren't all Excel nerds like I am. I'm an Excel junkie. I just love living in the data and the information. But if left to my own devices, I may have blind spots.
Right.
So I think those continuous improvement folks have that healthy disrespect for the norm, for same as last year for Sally. Maybe they are maybe a more creative type, or maybe they are someone who says, hey, I have that self-leadership to continue to move forward and not just live in the spreadsheet or live in the CRM or live in the content or the piece. And so it is a fairly atypical, standard profile of a RevOps employee. But I also believe that again, RevOps is evolving, and it is evolving into something that I believe in 5 years, if you walk into a business and they don't have a RevOps function, you're going to be on the wrong side of growth history in where we are in this trajectory. And so it is an evolution of RevOps. To have continuous improvement thinking there is sure, it's atypical, but we don't have to just leave that to P&C or to HR and say, hey, how do we get better? Let's partner with them and have that right here so that every day our 20, 30, 40, 100 people, however many folks we have in our org, have a foundation and environment and support to get better. If they can get better every day, we can bring more value to the business.
Right. And Jeff, you touched on something a moment ago when you said what may have worked in February might not be what works today. I think that leads us on well to the reality of the new normal for all of us across the board. I'm a fair way away from you right now, but from your perspective, from where you sit right now within the revenue operations space, what does the new normal look like? What do you anticipate? What does it feel like? What is the texture of it? How does it impact you? Yeah.
I think there's two answers to that, Gideon. I think the first answer is there is a market environment being driven by the shutdown and the quarantine that is hopefully a temporary normal, which is this 90-day, 180-day, 270-day, good Lord, better not be more than 270-day market dynamic of the impact of businesses shutting down and communities shutting down. I think that drives the need for us to reinvestigate our sales methodology, relook at our marketing outbound, relook at our value proposition, lead with empathy in our sales organization around, hey, what you might be going through right now could be something completely different. But the longer term play is much more interesting, and that is around you and I both sitting at home right now, or at least I'm sitting in my living room saying, hey, I've been here now for 105 or 110 days. This is my home office, and I'm not just working from home. And so as you look at bringing sales organizations, but also support organizations like RevOps, bringing them into virtual, it changes the dynamic. For me personally, and where my company goes, we go to market primarily through inside sales.
Right.
So sales motion may be a little less impacted than say an enterprise sales rep who's on the road traveling, sitting in front of a CEO of a hospital. And that's not exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about is how do we structure, motivation? How do we really dive into new channels of communication? How do we be much more effective with our time? How do we do things like focus on our wellness? Our mission at MindBody is to connect the world to wellness. And then how do we make sure we're drinking our own champagne and caring for ourselves and each other in this time? So I think there are some inherent short-term challenges around how do we make sure we communicate? How do we replace the swivel chair, right? Oh, I don't know how to do this. Do you do that? And so we're using, communication tools like messengers or chat boards, whatever that might be. But I think there's also this other dynamic and opportunity for all of us to say, okay, what if we took some of the geographic boundaries off where we can find talent in the world? especially as we look to become more diverse workplace and to globalize and expand. How do we be able to say, okay, we used to have to be within a certain amount geographic space of one of our offices. Maybe some of those restrictions relax and we can, widen our talent pool and get deeper in some of those areas around geographic expansion or product expansion, localization, or just tap into different communities that we didn't have access to before. So I believe there's a great opportunity here that is the much longer term for us to provide more value as a revenue operations group. And doing so, what that new normal for us is really around things like this. We're on Zoom today. We may have been sitting in a conference room together, doing physical high fives, and the world has changed.
Or vice versa, you may not have found time to do this in the old world because you had stand-up meetings and impromptu meetings and ad hoc meetings and all of the above, which kept you pretty busy until the moment was there where you had to go home and go see your family, and now all of a sudden you're adding value not only to your internal organization but everybody that's tuning here within the wider revenue operations and sales operations forum, which we're thankful for, and probably the same for myself too. We did this and launched this podcast channel recently, and obviously there was things that have happened recently which have been a catalyst for change. So maybe on the flip side of it, I might not have made that decision as quickly had things been, had the status quo continued and I was buried in performance marketing and all the rest of it. So definitely a good on both sides of the equation. In terms of your passion for leadership, I'm interested to know about your effective framework for an execution strategy, of course, for enterprise value creation and acceleration. Kind of bringing back as we start to wrap things up now with where we started. What does that effective framework really look like?
Yeah, the defining moment of my career started in my personal life. I had my second child who was born very premature. Spent a lot of time in the hospital. And it really changed my mindset on people and empathy and how wonderful folks could be. And I think it redirected, it turned a dial for me in my professional career as well, where I can look to that point, that time in my career and say, that's the time where I really changed my focus from improving myself as a means of growing my career and impact to improving others and investing in others as a means to grow my own career and our careers. And they all tie in. And I think, it's really hard. It's kind of faux pas to talk about grow your own career. But I believe that, and I've learned in time that the fastest way for me to accelerate my impact on the business I support is to deeply invest in my team, and much less around sharpening my own swords around systems or processes, and really thinking about how do I create and foster that culture of continuous improvement that will then translate into that team acceleration where we're all going faster, more velocity, and in the general same direction. And I think it gives you the ability to do different things that you can't do.
Jeff, I've got to ask the question before I hear anything more from you. So if you're investing in those people, which you are, and you've created this awesome culture of continuous improvement, which you have, if I was listening to this from wherever and tuning in, I'd be thinking, I'm going to take Jeff's best employee because he's doubled down on investing in them. They have the right mindset and all of that. So how do you, Jeff, after making all of that investment, kind of safeguard yourself and keep the retention play on internal team members that you've invested in deeply? Because these guys are now really well educated, well equipped, and have a great experience set where they could probably be a leader in their own right somewhere else in the not too distant future. Maybe not on the same level as you exactly per se, but still valid in their own right, and probably they want to learn.
Yeah. It's a great question, and it's something that I've stopped losing sleep over at night because first of all, I think by prioritizing the people over me or maybe the team, I can't say anything other than if that happens or that situation happens, I can't say anything other than congratulations, you deserved it. Go kick ass there, and let's stay in touch. But I believe that by valuing the people, our people become ingrained and entrenched in the mission of what we're on. And so looking at the grass being greener somewhere else is something that hopefully doesn't happen as often. And it's not a unique to Jeff situation. This is, if you that great environment, if you create a culture and foster it to the right way, then your team wants to be on that journey, and they know we've created these opportunities like the continuous improvement opportunity that maybe doesn't exist in other RevOps functions, to say I can grow here and I can take that. But I think it develops a bit of loyalty, and not loyalty to me by any means. They are loyal to what we are doing as a team, to that acceleration, to the growth, to the value creation. And it makes it, what we say, we call it the and strategy on our team. It is high performance and creating a culture that we want to work in. And we get to do that. We, in our RevOps team, we follow the culture of our organization. We align with our core values. And within RevOps, we say, this is our culture to create, of how we want to work, how we want to talk to one another. And people want to be part of that. And if they don't, then we just say, great, how do we help you be happy? How do we help you go home and talk to your person and have more Good Fridays, more, that was a good week, right? I always tell my team, what's the Good Friday quotient? How many times do you go home and tell your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, mom, dad, dog, cat, I had a great week, right? I want to have a lot more Good Fridays than bad Fridays. And if they don't, then we just have that conversation. Hey, how do we put you in a position to have more Good Fridays? We always hope it can be with us on our team. And if it can't, maybe it's in our organization, another function. And if it's not, by valuing the people and saying, hey, we value you more than that, find the right home. So my hope and desire is that we create a place that people are emboldened and impassioned and empowered to go be great and go, flex their muscles.
Very awesome, Jeff. What better note to summarize with? You don't need to say more than that. You just nailed it, more than you know. So I'm going to thank you earnestly for an outstanding session. We've learned a lot from you here today. Would love to hear more from you again in the near future. And literally from all of the team here at RevAmp, we'd like to thank you for giving us your time, your experience, your knowledge, and most of all, your passion. I mean, RevOps is such an exciting space to be a part of, and helping to define the way things go. So it really transcended from you that you have a ton of passion for what you do. And I'm sure that's infectious right the way through your team.
A pleasure, an honor, and a heck of a lot of fun. It's good to do it. So thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to join anytime. Thanks, Gideon.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Cheers.